I'm so deeply honored and grateful that you're joining me for a fresh approach to painting, Gateway to the Inner Artist. Abstract U1 Memory Gardens. So we're going to paint a memory garden painting, which is from a series that I created with lines, shapes, and form. Take a look at Moreau. He was a surrealist, but sometimes referred to as a lyrical abstractionist. In relation to this painting, look deeply at his paintings in regard to his strong sense of color and how he used that to keep his shapes separate. So we're going to have the opportunity, the golden opportunity, to repurpose a canvas. So this one has a lot of color on it, which is fine. As long as you have just acrylic paint or watercolor paint on your canvas, this will work to repurpose. You can't paint acrylic over oil, and that's the old thing to remember with that is oil and water don't mix. We'll start this painting by picking up some phthalo blue and determining where our light is coming from. We want our light in this instance to come from the right, so our deeper, richer colors will be on the left side. And just start by making a series of marks. Now I'm using a square brush, and that square brush gives me my marks perfectly. And so I'm going to place the darker blue on the left side. I'm going to continue all the way down the canvas. I'm going to add a little bit of my light blue violet to my phthalo blue, and I'm going to put that in this area. This is where the light is hitting the canvas. Abstract paintings do have a plan. So the plan is right now, when we're formulating our abstract painting, we're just determining where the light is coming from. So we'll put in a series of vertical marks, turn your brush on its angle, and make horizontal marks. I'm covering over that repurposed canvas, and nicely there's some deep greens were on that canvas, so I'm going to let that shine through because I like the look of that. Can add some hooker green and alizarin crimson to get my darkest darks. So I'm not cleaning my brush, I'm just adding it to my brush, and you see how then my marks are deeper. And I like that. So I have variation in color, I have variation in size of my mark, and variation in shape from turning my mark from vertical to horizontal. One more step I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my brush. I'm going to switch to my wash brush, which is a wide brush. The good thing about this brush, as the other brush, it comes to a chiseled edge. I'm going to continue making my marks with the wider brush. And as you can see, it's going to give you some even more variety of shape. Add a little water to my brush, and I'm going to get different colors. A little bit lighter color. And that phthalo blue is a dye color. Dye color meaning it's transparent, and it changes when you add water to it. Well, that's something fun that you can work with. The background is very important, so don't get bored with this and rush through it. I'm adding a little violet to my paint brush and blue violet and going over my phthalo, and that's giving me even more of a contrast of color. I can do another step, add a little white to that brush. Again, I didn't wash my brush, and in this light area I can make some more marks. This is where the sun's coming in. So this is one of the best parts of this painting. It's fun, it's simple, it gives you depth, it's interesting, and it gives us a pattern beginning in our abstract painting. So I am complete with my background, with my blues. I've used alizarin crimson. I even had a little bit of ultramarine left on my palette from my other painting. So that goes right hand in hand with we're repurposing the paint, a little bit of extra paint. So I placed it in strategic areas and used my ultramarine blue. So now I've let this completely dry and I have cleaned my brush. What I'm going to do is pick up some raw sienna and I'm just going to make some marks on this left side. It's bringing in a little bit of light in the brown. Now paintings, again, we talked about how abstract paintings, just like any other painting, does have a plan, even though it's abstract. So you either want to go with the cooler colors in the background and the warmer browns in the front, or you want to have the warm browns in the background and the cool colors in the front. That's pretty standard practice for an interesting painting. So this is why I'm adding the raw sienna at this point to the front of my background, because I'm working with the background. And that is a warm color. So I've determined that I want my cools in the back and my lighter, warmer colors in the front or foreground. So just adding a little bit of color. We can always go back and add a little more raw sienna, but for now, that's enough color. I'm ready to start adding my shapes, my squares for flowers, and every flower in Memory Gardens is reminding me of a happy family member or a friend that I really enjoy being with. I'm holding that thought while I'm making my painting or completing my marks. I'm going to pick up some bright red and I'm going to make a clump of red flowers. Now, I'm not going to put it smack dab in the middle. I'm going to move it over slightly to the side and begin my first flower. Right there. I make a mark going down and then I make a horizontal mark right on top of it just to give it a little interest so it's not a complete square. And I'm going to take my time with this because this is an important flower. These 3 flowers will be your focal point. So there's one. Here's another one. This one I'm going to make square. And this one, again, using my brilliant red, I'm going to make one on the other side of that big flower in the center. Now, this one is a little bigger than these other 2. I'm going to just make that middle one a little larger so it is my largest flower. I like the shape of that. Now I'm going to add in, taking the edge of my brush, I'm going to put in some more little groupings of flowers, and I'm going to take it right off the edge. So this little group of flowers start off to the right, and then they go right off the edge of the canvas. So I'm actually going to add a little red paint to that to make that happen. All right, and now what I've done over here, I want to balance out on the left side. So in my area where I added the raw sienna, I'm going to add a couple flowers. And I'm not putting them in a row. I'm making them random, but random within the clumps. So now I have 1, 2, 3 clumps of flowers. I like that. I'm going to go up to the top. I'm going to pick up some orangey red, a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to make 2 flowers go off the end of the canvas. Let's see, where do I want to put those? I will put those right up in this section. These are slightly smaller than our focal point flowers. And these are not going to be attached to anything. They're going to, again, make the viewer think, what is it up in that right corner? Is that another flower? Well, how come it doesn't have a stem? So you're adding a little mystery to your painting. Now we have our rectangular and square shapes. The next thing we want to do is put our stems in. So I'm going to switch brushes. And you'll learn to use different brushes. You'll have favorite brushes. But I like a nice angled brush. I'm going to pick up some red. And I'm going to flip that canvas over. Start at the end and go straight down into my flower. Well, that made it so much easier. So I like that. Action. Be creative with your marks. These are the lines that separate the shapes. And I'm separating the shapes from the background. So I'm making a second layer. My first layer was my background. My second layer is my flowers. So these little flowers over here, they need stems as well. I'm going to take those right off. That wasn't totally straight, but that's okay because not every stem is exactly the same as the one before it. There, and I'll do the same thing over here. As you go, pay attention to your NOTAN. Pull them out occasionally, your NOTAN and even your thumbnail, so you can determine where your light's coming from, how you're doing with your shapes. A NOTAN, remember, is a black and white of your painting. So I've got my reds in. I want to have the flowers that are in the sunlight to be just slightly lighter in color than the ones that are in the middle of the painting. So I'm going to pick up some orange, and I'm just going to paint over the tops of these two that are totally in the sun. And the same thing, once this is dry, you'll have an easier time of putting that second layer on. But these little flowers are in the sunlight as well. So I'm going to make the centers of those slightly orange. I'm not doing that with the ones in the middle. When these are dry, I'm going to put another layer on. So those are very, very deep and rich in that crimson red. So let's see if I can get these to be just a little bit more orange. And that works. Wonderful. I'm going to wipe my brush off. I don't have to wipe it off completely. I'm going to pick up some yellow, some Indian yellow. And I'm going to continue with my flowers. Strategically putting flowers. Now I'm going to go to a little different color yellow. So you see what I'm doing. I'm making different sizes of flowers, different shapes of flowers. I've got my light flowers in this area. And I'm going to stop with the flowers, just put a couple more. Go ahead and draw my lines. These are my stems. I don't have to have stems coming out of every flower, and I don't have to have every stem go from the flower off the edge of the canvas. So be a little more random with your stems. There, that looks good. Now I'm going to fill in with some greens and yellows, just working with my palette. Oh, that's a little too bright, so I'm going to take it down with some hooker green. Let's see if I can get a lighter green. There, I've got a nice light green. And I'm going to fill in this entire area with grass. Now grass doesn't grow in a straight line, so I'm going to now purposely put in some crooked lines of grass. And I'm going to pick up some light yellow. Look at where my sun's coming from. It's coming from here, so I'm going to make lighter streaks of grass, lighter lines. This is my lines. Now you see where the lines are separating the shapes. These lines act as a separation of my square blocks of flowers. So continue on until your canvas is completely full of bright, happy flowers, grass, and stems. So I'm going to add 2 more flowers because I've got a big open area. I'm going to add a couple more red flowers, but these are not going to be as large as these flowers. These will be the deep red because they're in the dark area of the painting. And then I'll add my stems. So you have to determine, when you're doing your painting, you have to determine, do I have enough area filled in? Do I have too much blank area in one area or not? And that's going to be your creativity or your personal style that you're adding to this painting. I'm going to clean my brush and stick with my big wash brush just because it's nice and soft. If I can get enough red off of that brush. Yep, that's good. All right, so now I'm going to pick up some raw sienna, and my raw sienna didn't show up enough on this side, so I'm going to make some marks, and I'm going to carry that all the way down. It's okay if I'm going over the stems, because what we want is we don't want the viewer to know what we painted first, so that works. I'm turning my brush. I'm using that same pattern of vertical strokes or turning my brush to create another pattern. There. And that's good. Now that adds a little more interest to my painting. So now that I've dried my canvas, I'm looking, it looks different than it did when it was wet. And that's because acrylic paint dries darker. And so my transparent raw sienna has blended in. I'm going to use a solid raw sienna, that's an opaque raw sienna, and I'm going to make some more marks over those. Better to take your time. Less is more because you're in your finishing steps of your painting. So I don't see much of a contrast between the grass and the stems on the right side as I do on the left, and I need to have some contrast or it's going to be a boring painting. So I'm going to look at where is my light coming from. It's coming from the right side. I'm going to pick up some yellow and I'm going to make some marks. And remember, grass doesn't grow perfectly straight. I'm going to make some marks that cross over there like that, and different grass strokes. That adds a little more interest, a little more shape with the lines. I'm going to then put some more white, I think, up where the light is. I pick up some white and some phthalo blue first. And I'm going to see, well, that's a little dark, so I definitely need to go lighter. I'm going to pick up some plain white since I have some blue on my brush, and let's see if these marks, and I've changed the shape of my brush as well. That's going to be up to you, how many different brushes you would like to use to make marks. You don't want it to get sloppy, and that is a risk that you take when you're adding these last few steps in. So you want the light to come in and you want it to hit the tops of the flowers. I've got some red flowers here, but now that they've dried, they look totally dark. I'm going to add a little Indian yellow and orange, and I'm going to touch the tops. Oh, that's perfect. I'm going to touch the tops of those flowers. Now that adds a little more contrast. So what we've learned is that an abstract painting has a plan. It has definite composition. And how we created that was we grouped the shapes together. We separated the shapes with lines. We used color to add interest, and we did a variety of colors. So I used all the colors on my palette for the second layer, which was the flowers. And I added some oranges. I added some smaller flowers down in the foreground because it was just too boring. And that's the decision that you have to make as the artist when you're completing your memory garden.